Welcome to Handicap Movers and Shakers, episode 10. I think we're up to now. We're building up a bit of a library, hopefully now, of horses in your tracker. Again, last week, plenty of winners chucked up from Handicap Movers and Shakers. So we'll endeavour to keep kicking. For those of you new to the videos, the handicap marks get revised on a Tuesday morning at the early hour of 7 o'clock. And this is just my thoughts on who's becoming well handicapped, who's becoming badly handicapped. Both are equally important, I think. And we do it in the style of the old top of the pops, going up, going down, non-movers and new entries. And there's something in every section this week. So we'll get started with the horses going up in the handicap and starting with the Paul Nicholls trained Take Your Time, who won in good style at Wincanton under Bryony Frost, chronically underused, as I mentioned on the SBK podcast, and brilliant on Ridoto at the weekend as she was. He jumped really well over fences, quite a wide margin winner. He's got an £8 rise. On soft, heavy ground, I'm always a little bit loath to take that at face value. But I think with this horse, it's reasonable enough because he won a handicap hurdle off 126. His form then tailed off. He's obviously been a bit difficult to train, but he clearly loves jumping and he's clearly a dour stay by destination. All they do is just stay. They're not very quick, but they do gallop forever. If he stays in this vein of form, I think he can contest some better quality handicaps than this, and I think he'll stay. I think soft, heavy ground is really important to him. Paul Nicholls is very lucky to have two excellent jockeys over fences in Bryony Frost and Harry Cobden, as well as Freddie Ginger actually for a £5 claim. He's good and brave to a fence. So I think this horse got plenty of options, and I don't think an £8 rise up to 125 will stop him. A horse that surprised me was Foxboro, who stepped up nearly 6 furlongs in trip and bolted up at Exeter. Handicap has not been quite so hard on him, only gone up £5 to a mark of 124. Now, this is a career high mark, and Harry Kimber was claiming off him, but it looked to me like this trip just unlocked another level of performance to him. He was very well back before the off, so connections were clearly confident that this trip was going to suit him. So Foxboro is not one that I'd be all that keen to oppose next time, I don't think. Whether I'd be with him, I'm not sure. It might just be one of those horses that sometimes can just spoil a race for you if you're not sure where you sit, wouldn't want to oppose him, wouldn't want to be with him. And I think Foxboro might be that type of horse. Also getting a hefty rise of £8 was Val Dancer, who's a fairly lowly rated horse. He's only up to 112 now with that £8 rise. He won at Leicester on very heavy ground, but stayed really powerfully. This was a big step back in the right direction. I think, again, for him, ground is clearly important, and I think he'll stay further than this. He wasn't stopping at the end. Like I said, £8 rise is plenty, but I was looking back through his form, and he was pretty well backed before the off on handicap hurdle debut off a mark of 113. So get the impression that someone, possibly Connections, thought that 113 wasn't harshly treating him over hurdles. Jumped very well over fences, had Charlie Deutsch on board, which is always a bonus. So Val Dancer is one that, again, might just, while the ground is wet and soft and hard work, even up a little bit further in trip, might see him defy an £8 rise. Also at Leicester was a really likeable horse, the Edgar Wallace, who got back-to-back wins in chases. He's got a £3 rise for his efforts up to a mark of 133. But he did win a novice handicap chase off 132 at Market Raising over 2 mile 5. This was over 2 mile 4 at Leicester. I think he's going to stay further than this, and I think that step up in trip might just see him defy this rise. I did see an interview where Matt Nicholls, assistant to Kim Bailey, said he needs plenty of time between his races because he does give his all, which he absolutely does. He's got a wonderful attitude. So probably won't be seen out all that quickly. But I do think off 133, there's a chance that he could land the hat-trick if he went up in trip. One of the sore points for me last week was Hardy Boy, who I was away on holiday last week, and he was one of my rare bets last week. Beau Morgan was jocked up to ride him at Taunton, claiming 5. I think Beau Morgan is absolutely mustard for a £5 claim, and then I can't remember which card was off, but Ben Jones rerouted, so the £5 claim was gone. And unfortunately, Ben gave a pretty poor display from the saddle, I thought, following on from making the same mistake at Taunton the time before, where Hardy Boy gets to the front, pricks his ears, thinks the job is done, doesn't do an awful lot when he's in front. He does need delivering late. Beau Morgan is excellent as that, as we've seen with Twig, his sort of flagship horse. Ben Jones is the opposite. He likes to kick early and get the race won. That just doesn't suit Hardy Boy. For his efforts in finishing second, he's gone up another £2 to 112. Hopefully that will mean that they now do need to utilise Beau Morgan. That this horse is not going to win off a mark of 112 under Ben Jones. Maybe Beau Morgan slightly more patient ride, £5 off. I'm not giving up on Hardy Boy yet, but I may be following her over the cliff. So perhaps make your own mind up on that. Also winning and getting an absolutely massive rise of £10 was the Greenall and Guerrero trained Horatio Apples. It's gone up £10 to a mark of 115, winning what I think was a nothing contest at Bangor. They were pretty exposed as a bunch before the off, and during the race, to my mind, fell apart. He didn't have to do an awful lot to win this. £10, I think that will stop him. Off 115, I'll be opposing Horatio Apples wherever he goes next, unless by some weird quirk he was to line up against the self-same opposition, all of who looked pretty moderate to my eye. One interesting one now coming up is Classical Lord, who's gone up £3 to a mark of 119. Now he's interesting. He won at Bangor and did it in good style. I would upgrade this performance because Tim Vaughan's yard is in desperate form. Just 6% winners to runners, one winner from his last 17, and 6 out of his last 17 have pulled up. There's only 2 horses really that have run any sort of race at all for him in that 17, and the other one is going to get a mention in a minute as well. So I think horses that run against yard form, you can upgrade their performance, and Classic Lord has done a good job. He's also quite highly rated on the flat, and I think 119 still underestimates his ability. He stayed a mile 6 on the flat, so he can step up and trip further, and I think Classic Lord is a horse to follow, particularly if Tim Vaughan's yard can find a bit of form, but they've been out of form pretty much most of the season. Beat the Bat was beaten by Dysart Enos at Cheltenham. Everyone raving about Dysart Enos. Personally, I'm a little bit cool on her. I think Beat the Bat is a stayer. He was dropping back in trip at Cheltenham, having been running over virtually 2 mile 4 last time. And when he won over 2 mile 4, I think it was at Exeter, he needed every yard of that trip to get the job done. So I think dropping back in the trip wasn't ideal for him. He's been raised £7 though for that second placed effort up to 132, obviously using Dysart Enos as a sort of yardstick. He could be interesting just in a 2 mile 4 handicap hurdle, maybe something like the Lanzarote. Wouldn't be completely against him at a mark of 132. Either way, I think he's an important horse to have in your tracker because I think it will give you some sort of guide as to the level of form Dysart Enos has actually run to if Beat the Bat goes on into handicaps from here on in, which I suspect might be the case. And Ginny's Destiny. Now, I thought she was really impressive he was really impressive, at Cheltenham on Saturday. Plenty of people disagree and think Grey Dawning's mistake, 3 out, 2 out, changed the result. That might well be the case, but jumping is the name of the game, and this horse is a brilliant jumper. Up £5 for that win now to a mark of 146. I don't think he can defy that mark over 2 mile 4, but I think all this horse does is gallop and stay. I'd be surprised if they don't look to step him up in trip now to 3 miles. Clearly jumps well around Cheltenham. Maybe they'll come back there in the new year for a 3 mile handicap chase. But Ginny's Destiny, I'm going to keep with him until he's beaten. I think this is a real smart horse. I like how he does his business. He's a very reliable jumper, which I put a lot of weight on. So a mark of 146, I'll be sticking with Ginny's Destiny just yet. Then the other Tim Vaughan horse that I mentioned, Artistic Endeavour, finished second over 2 miles at Lingfield, finishing like a train, as he has done on all 3 starts this season. Previously finished second at Chepstow and 5th at Cheltenham, over 2 miles, finishing powerfully each time. I think this horse needs to step up in trip, and when he does, I think he'll win. He gets outpaced, stays on, only on a mark of 111. It's frustrating that he's creeping up in little chunks for finishing second, but I'd be surprised now if the connections don't look to up him up to 2 mile 4, and I think he's a surefire winner in waiting, albeit there's a bit of a caveat about the yard form that I mentioned. White Rhino ended a dismal day for the Guerrero and Greenall team at Cheltenham on Friday, where no winner in the world is going to replace Jess Gill, but White Rhino does look an impressive, progressive horse. He's gone up £6 to mark of 129 for his win in the 3 mile handicap hurdle. I think this is just a big, raw horse. He's a chaser in the making. And I think Henry Brook didn't have to be all out on him. Although he was pushing and nudging away, I think that's just greenness and immaturity as opposed to sort of getting to the bottom of this horse's reserves. Got to the front, pricked his ears, had to be pushed out up the hill. But I think a stronger pace, soft ground, this horse stays well. Mark of 129 for White Rhino won't stop him. And when you go back and take a look, I think this horse started Handicap Life off a mark of 79. They got him devilishly well handicapped off 3 runs in novice hurdles. Then are you wise to that? A winner for Handicap Movers and Shakers, back left-handed, up in trip, got the job done, but I think we were a touch lucky. I didn't like how he jumped coming down the hill. I think his jumping's going to have to sharpen up. Handicap has put him up £5 to a mark of 130. People are starting to sort of think about the Ultima. I think he's going to need to be an awful lot better in the jumping department to win a handicap such as the Ultima, competitive race like that. He's got time to improve, but he is going to need to. But a mark of 130 wouldn't look overly stiff if he can brush up his jumping. Excelsis Deo was a disappointing next best selection for the SBK betting podcast. The Nap one, but he was disappointing. I thought this was not a penalty kick, but I thought he had a great chance. Just looked to get outpaced. He was mentioned after his run in October in one of the first Handicap Movers and Shakers, and I said maybe he wants to go up in trip. I got sucked into thinking that the new course and slightly softer ground might just draw out his stamina. But watching him, I think he just looks one-paced. Up a pound to a mark of 133. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't go up in trip now to an intermediate trip. Could maybe even try the sort of 2 mile 4 handicap chase back at Cheltenham in January. Jumping was sloppy. That'll need to be better, but I wonder if they just go a gear slower, whether that might help him. So I'm not giving up on Inexus Deo for Harry Fry at JP McManus just yet. Up a pound to a mark of 133. Then the big winner of the weekend for Misters Hinchy and Hobson. Fugitive and all his fans got up on the line to win the December Gold Cup. Brilliant ride by Gavin Sheehan, and a brilliant ride on the runner-up, Ridoto, and we'll talk about these two together because I think it's relevant. So Fugitive has gone up £6 to a mark of 157. Ridoto has gone up £5 to a mark of 148. Brilliant rides, 2 very different ways of doing the job. Gavin Sheehan couldn't go the gallop early on, and Fugitive had to sit and take his medicine, whereas Bryony Frost on Ridoto forced a very strong pace and looked to have judged it to perfection. But Ridoto would get £1 now for a very short head result on Saturday. But I just don't think it would make the world of difference. I think Fugitive was going to win that race every time. £1, £2 doesn't make any difference. Ridoto gave his all, Fugitive gave his all. I just think Fugitive's a very strong stayer. Don't think he does an awful lot when he gets to the front. And if you watch it back, he actually got to the front halfway at the run-in. Ridoto got back to him and then he found again. So I can't see Fugitive contesting handicaps, I must be honest, off a mark of 157. But if they were to run that race again on those revised terms, I'd be Fugitive every day of the week. And then finally, the last horse going up was Broadway Boy, who was a confident nap for the SBK betting podcast at the weekend. Gave me multiple heart attacks on the way round, 3 awful jumping errors. Looked to lose his sort of concentration or his confidence momentarily. But still got the job done in a competitive race. He's gone up £4 now to a mark of 150. They're talking about aiming him at the Browns novice chase at the Cheltenham Festival. I think soft ground gives him a good chance. And when you just look back through the last few winning marks that horses carried that won this race, previous years, last year the Real Whacker was rated 153. Or okay, maybe we thought he was a bit of a turn up, but then 2022 L'Empresse 159, 2021 was Monkfish on 152, and 2020 was Champ on 153. So he's in and around the ballpark, and if you think those 3 mistakes, if he can iron those out, he's surely got plenty more to find. He is only a 5-year-old. I'd be concerned about him on quicker ground, but if the ground came up soft, I do think he might just be a little bit underestimated, providing he doesn't have a hard campaign between now and March. Nigel Twiston-Davies does like to run his horses, to be applauded for that, but I think sometimes that can just leave a mark come the festival. Now for horses coming down in the handicap, not as many this week, and still not as many coming down in sizable chunks. Royal Mur bumped into what I think was a very well handicapped horse and impressive performance in Val Dancer at Leicester. He also weakened over that 2 mile 6 furlong trip, and I think Royal Mur might drop back to the 2.5 miles that he won over previously. I think a marker 97 will see him win. I think he bumped into a good rival. Don't think he quite stayed the trip, but he still pulled a long way clear of the third, and so Royal Mur certainly would remain of interest for David Pipe. And a horse that I thought ran a really peculiar race at Leicester was Regal Blue, who finished behind the Edgar Wallace. Looked thoroughly disinterested in the early stages on his chase debut. His jumping was pretty scrappy at times and a little bit slow, and then he came hard on the bridle through the middle of the race and jumped with absolute brilliance through the middle part of the race. He was long, he was brave, he was quick and nimble and taking ground at every fence. Then looked to get a little bit outpaced over the 2 mile 4 furlong trip and was weakening away, and then finished with a wet sail up the stiff Leicester finish. I think this is a horse that if he has 3 miles, been dropped a pound to a mark of 123. I think he's quite a smart horse in the making. He's clearly a bit of a peculiar character. He was pulled up very early on his seasonal debut over hurdles at Newbury earlier in the season. But I think there's an engine there. Shares his sire French Navy with Marine Nationale. He's obviously more of a stayer than Marine Nationale, but I do think he's quite a smart horse, and a mark of 123 should see him winning over 3 miles over fences. Then an old favourite of mine who has been given some sort of fairish respite from the handicapper, and it's Jacamar for Anthony Charlton, holding the licence for Milton Harris while he's answering a few questions also, I believe. And Jacamar's come down £4 now to a mark of 118 after his run at Leicester last week. Jacamar, to my mind, has got very important criteria. He needs to go right-handed. He needs good ground. When he gets those criteria, he's a pretty decent horse. He's won 7 career races. 5 of those have been right-handed, and of those 5, 4 of them have been on good ground. The other one was on good to soft. He's only had these conditions twice in his last 10 or so runs. He won at Leicester off a mark of 130, and he was then 8th, but that was in the Coral Trophy at Kempton off a mark of 135. He's now down to a mark of 118. Left-handed on soft ground just is no good for this horse whatsoever. I'd be really interested to see him at Kempton, maybe over Christmas period, right-handed, mark of 118. I think this horse has got an engine still, and I'd be keen to keep Jacamar in my tracker. Fontana Ellissi was definitely mentioned in these videos last year for Sam Drinkwater. He returned in the 3 mile handicap hurdle behind White Rhino at Cheltenham this weekend, but was very weak in the market before the off. Always seems to need his reappearance run. First time on soft ground, I don't think that quite suited him as well as he preferred good to soft. He's come down £2 to a mark of 116. He'll be a standing dish in Cheltenham 3 mile handicap hurdles for the rest of the season, and he's finished second a couple of times and been unlucky a couple of times. So Fontana Ellissi stays in my tracker, and I'd be disappointed if he can't land a 3 mile handicap hurdle. And then a horse that I never thought I would put up in Handicap Movers and Shakers. I've not really been a fan of him, but Monmiral has been dropped £3 to a mark of 142 after, to me, looking to be outpaced throughout the December Gold Cup. But I liked his jumping. I thought his jumping kept him in there in the main. And this is a horse that when you go back through his form, he was staying on in the Aintree hurdle behind Ep10. Got outpaced then and stuck at it. Could just be that he wants 3 miles these days. He's had the wind up. I think there's plenty to be taken from the fact that Paul Nicholls was so confident before the December Gold Cup, had pushed Harry Cobden to ride him. Mark of 142, I'm sure they'll find a race for this horse, perhaps a better bit of ground, 3 miles. I'll be chancing Monmiral if he gets those conditions. And then the other one to come out of the the Cheltenham Festival, Cheltenham this weekend, easy as that, finished behind Broadway Boy, was quite well back. Lots of shrewd sort of pundits saying that this step up and trip was what he wanted. And I'm not inclined to disagree. I think he does want a little bit further, but I don't think it was the trip that beat him. Just never looked comfortable around Cheltenham. Look back through his form, and his best chasing form has come on flat left-handed tracks, Newcastle and Haydock. He did win over hurdles at Chepstow, but hurdles and fences perhaps make a different requirement on your balance and you're jumping up and down hills. So easy as that. I just wonder if they go back left-handed up into the sort of 3 mile, maybe 3 1/4, stretch them a bit, but 3 miles around somewhere like Doncaster Newcastle or Haydock, Wetherby, I'd be really interested in Easy as that. I think he's becoming well handicapped now off a mark of 137. And then to finish the non-movers and new entries. So the first non-mover is Appleway, who I thought was really impressive, winning her chase last week. Stays on a mark of 141. She's not going to go into a handicap, I'm sure, but just for sort of mathematical purposes, when she goes into open company in the Spring Festival, she'll get her £7 allowance. That would already put her up to 148, just £2 shy of Broadway Bob at 150. And I spoke about how close he is to sort of the threshold of being competitive in those festival novice chases. I wonder whether they might miss the Cheltenham Festival and go to Aintree, where she ran so well last season. But Appleway really impressed me with her jumping, winning her novice chase last week. Another Lucinda Russell horse, Lebowski. Now, he was mentioned earlier on in the season from the steward's room because he'd run at Chepstow, been very well punted, and then they couldn't fit the tongue tie, and he ran without it, and he'd had a windop previously. Well, they got the tongue tie on this time, and he bumped into a Haslam JP Horn Cape up at Newcastle. That was over 2 mile one. I just wonder whether he didn't perhaps stay that trip as well. Look for him on slightly better ground over 2 miles. Stays on a mark of 122. He's a difficult horse to catch right, but I think he's got an engine, and 122 underestimates him, provided there's no lurkers in the field. And then a horse that didn't run this weekend, but I thought it was interesting, his mark remained unchanged, and that's Masaccio for Alan King. Now, he beat the Bat when they met earlier in the season. Masaccio stays on 129. As I mentioned previously, beat the Bat is up to 132. I think 129 for this Alan King trained horse looks a fair mark, and I'm sure they'll exploit that in a handicap in the not too distant future. And then getting on to Grey Dawning, stays on a mark of 144. Now, I was very keen to oppose him. I mentioned him after on the Monday review after Haydock that I didn't like his jumping at Haydock when he won. He sort of dived left a couple of times and sort of only just got to the other side. I took the view that he was worth opposing at Cheltenham. His jumping was actually better than I expected in the main. A couple of fiddly errors down the back, but then, sure enough, he let fly at one and landed in the middle of it with Harry Skelton, and that put pay to his chance. Plenty are saying that without a mistake he wins. Well, yeah, of course he does, but it's jump racing, and horses that are prone to making errors will make errors, and my line of thinking is to oppose them when they do that. I will oppose Grey Dawning on undulating tracks every time he runs. I'll be wrong sometimes maybe, but I think I'll be right more often than I'm wrong. On a flat track, I would slightly temper my enthusiasm to oppose him. I think he'd get away with it a bit more on a flat track, as he did at Haydock, but I don't think this horse is a good jumper. That's my angle on him. If you disagree, the fact he stays on a mark of 144 and you think he would have beaten Ginny's Destiny, then you've got to be very keen on him wherever he goes next, because a mark of 144 would, in your book, underestimate him. Horse finished very fast in this world, flew home to finish just behind Go Dante at Cheltenham, stays on a mark of 120. He wants upping in trip, 2 mile 4. I think this is a ready winner. Really liked how he quickened up on horses they weren't stopping in front. He found a very good turn of foot. So in this world for the Skelton team, off a mark of 120, if he goes up to 2 mile 2, 2 mile 4, I'd be very keen on him. And then a couple more non-movers, all from Cheltenham. Hermino AA for Gary Moore. I've been quite keen on him as a novice chaser this year, and poor boy just can't jump. But he showed much better form in the 3 mile handicap hurdle behind White Rhino at Cheltenham on Friday. Got a bit outpaced top of the hill, stuck onto it well. I think this is a big step back in the right direction. I'm sure off a mark of 129, which remains unchanged, he can land a handicap hurdle over 3 miles this season. And then the concluding race of the day on the Saturday was the Mares hurdle. Ilovethenightlife stays on 124. She was outpaced hopefully at the top of the hill, but I like that she just kept on rolling away. She made a mistake at the last, otherwise she'd have been a bit closer still. I think at 3 miles for her, particularly 3 miles against mares, Joe Tizard's mare, Ilovethenightlife, off a mark of 124, can land a pot this winter. And then just one new entry, but I think it's one that you don't want to miss. It's Tregele for Kim Bailey. It's got an opening mark of 106. It's been running over 2 miles. Tregele is out of a mare called Emily Gray, who Kim Bailey trained a number of years ago. And I remember Emily Gray finishing like a train at Doncaster one day. It looked like she was going to be pulled up coming across the top and was only narrowly denied. It's one of those races that sort of stuck in my head. Well, Tregele at Worcester finished just about 2 lengths behind Ideal de Villeretz, who has now got a mark of 115. Tregele is off 106. By anyone's maths, that makes Tregele very well handicapped. I would be certain that on handicap debut, this horse will be over further than 2 miles. He's firmly in my tracker. In fact, he's in 2 because I don't want to miss him. So add him to yours as well. That concludes Handicap Movers and Shakers episode 10. I will be not around next week because the Tuesday is Boxing Day and I do not want to get divorced. So I won't be around next week, but I'll be back in the new year.